weren't ever very affluent growing up. We didn't have a lot of money, but because my parents were doing what they loved doing, they were really happy.
Was that after the Green Day concert or was that before?
She's like my best friend, so I feel really lucky to get to travel with her and work with her and experience all the things we experienced together. Like our whole family just got back from this Billie tour. Our dad helps with lighting direction.
Oh, wow.
Mom is like sort of day-to-day management. And then for Billie, sort of like dual, like sort of Billie's assistant and also Billie's day-to-day manager. Duos don't actually do as well, and they're less easy to market, and so I thought it would be smarter label it just a solo project for Billie.
Hi, this is Lauren Engel. Today I'm here with FINNEAS Interview.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. So you were born in LA, right?
I was, yeah. I was born, like 8 miles from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up with a family of like actors, musicians?
I think that's an interesting question because, like, on one hand, like I can give an answer, but it's also a very singular answer because it's the only. I just grew up one time, so it's all I've got.
Yeah.
But it was really cool. I think the thing that I sort of have talked about the most is that, like, we weren't ever very affluent growing up. We didn't have a lot of money, but because my parents were doing what they loved doing, they were really happy. And I think, like, of the friends of mine that grew up wealthier than I did with parents who had jobs that they didn't love, I just think growing up there was never sort of a real value of money above enjoying what you do with your life. And so I think to me that was also like a really important lesson, was like that my parents were happy and broke. And I think that was always like, oh, I could probably be happy and broke.
Yeah.
So it just made me want to do exactly what I was interested in my whole life.
Did you ever feel like you had pressure to do something creative, or like there's all these people around you, like
It's funny that you say that because I feel like it would seem like that, but I remember vividly being like a kid and being in like a Vons or a Rite Aid, and the woman at the checkout was like, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" And I was with my mom, and I said like, "I want to be an actor," and she is an actress. She was like, "Oh God, no!" Like I think you have this. I think you also, like, as an artist, you know what the hardships of a career like that are, and you know what I mean. I think it's like you don't want to like. I mean, like, I was an actor for a couple years, and you just get rejected a lot. That's just sort of the nature of the business. For any job you get, you went on, 30 auditions if you're lucky, sometimes hundreds of auditions where they just are like, yeah, you're not right. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's your whole day. It's like driving from the east side where we live to the west side, and then trying to find parking for 20 minutes, and then waiting in a waiting room for 35 minutes, and then going in, and you've prepared your 2 scenes, and you've got to memorize, and in one of the scenes you've got to like scream and be angry, and the other scene you got to cry, and they just go like, we're just going to only do the crying scene, and you're like, okay, but I prepared the other one. And they're like, nah, it doesn't matter. And then you do your like one scene, and like the person you're reading with isn't feeding you anything at all. Like you'll be like in the middle of this like heated emotional moment, and the person reading is like, so tell me about the night your father died, and they're just like not even looking at you.
Oh my God.
So I think I didn't feel a tremendous amount of pressure from them, but I did feel very inspired to do it because it always seemed like fun being in movies and being on stage. So it always seemed like fun, for sure.
Are they from California, or where are they from?
Mom's from Colorado originally, and Dad's from Connecticut.
Did they move here? So they kind of just moved here to follow their dreams?
They actually moved to New York to be in the theater community. My dad went to Juilliard, and my mom moved there to be a theater actress. And they met each other doing a regional theater production in Alaska.
Wow.
So you what happens, you can audition for stuff in New York that happens out of state, and then they'll fly you together to wherever the thing is happening. So they both auditioned. They were like, hey, do you want to go? Because it's funny, because it's a sort of a less popular community, because if you love living in New York and you just want to be in New York, you just want to be there and in it, and somebody goes like, hey, do you want to go spend 4 weeks rehearsing for a play and then 4 weeks doing a play in Alaska? You're like, I don't really want to spend 2 months in Alaska. But they were both kind of game. They both thought it would be fun, and they met doing that show. And Yeah, and then that was like 20 something years ago. It was a long time.
And then they put you into the LA choir, the children's choir. Did you want to join that?
Yeah, I really wanted to do that. They moved to LA sort of to start a family and get into the film world, which is sort of more Los Angeles based than New York based. And when I was 11 or 12, I decided I really wanted to be in this choir that a friend of mine was in at the time. And I had a really wonderful experience there. It was like, it's kids from the ages of like, I think it's 8 to 18, and I'd started at 12, and there's a bunch of different sort of levels of the choir. And I don't know, it's a little bit like a karate choir, right, where you go like up in the belt. Yeah. But it's really cool because it takes itself really seriously, and they work really hard, and I think that if you want to be a musician as a kid, it's great to be in an environment that takes that seriously and fosters sort of working really hard.
Do you travel as well with it?
Yeah, you travel in a sort of it's like pseudo touring. Like it's more of like, it's actually really nice. It's a lot like a field trip, but they schedule sort of concerts there too, so they call it a tour. Yeah. But it's like a week and a half each year. You go to like the first year I was in it, we went to just Arizona, because it was like the lower level choir, and we did a concert in Arizona. And then the second year it was the East Coast, and we went to DC and Jersey and New York City, and just sort of a wonderful 12 days of that. Did some shows. But yeah, I mean, I had a wonderful time. Billie was in it too. Yeah. Until she was far too busy. I aged out. I was 18, I was like, I can't do it anymore. And she was like, whatever, 15 or 16, and suddenly was like, I can't go on your tour because I sold out my own tour.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So who are the musicians in your family?
Mom plays some piano and some guitar.
She taught you?
Yeah, she taught me how to play some chords, and she's a songwriter, and she's a really wonderful songwriter, so she sort of introduced me to that, made it seem like something I'd want to do, and never was very strict about it ever. I would just be like, teach me how to write songs, and she'd be like, well, there's not really a right or wrong way to write a song. There's a billion different songs, but if you want to listen to some music and we can talk about the structure of it, and if you listen to a song that you love, like, and you're young and you don't know anything about it, like, you can go like, oh, this is the chorus, and here's how the chorus works, and this is what a bridge does, and, sort of the standard of that. And then Dad plays piano really well.
What kind of music were they playing in the house when you were growing up?
It was always an undercurrent of Beatles, just a lot of Beatles, and then sort of a melange of like what they grew up on, and then whatever they were hearing for the first time at the time. Dad has a pretty current music taste. He always has, and continues to, like, anytime Billie or I are on a playlist, he goes and listens to like everything that's on that playlist to like keep himself up on it.
That's so cool.
Yeah, he's big on it. So that was always, like, I feel like growing up was like Beatles, and then he was like listening to a lot of Avril Lavigne.
I love that. Oh my god.
Avril Lavigne's the best. Yeah.
And then when you were 12, was it Ableton, or what was the software?
I started using Logic. I think I was like 14, and it was because the price had gone down.
Oh yeah, about like $600.
Yeah, it went down from like $800 to $299 or something, and I'd been saving up for the $800, and so suddenly I was like, I can afford it. This is great. So I started just trying to teach myself how to produce and watching YouTube videos, and I was really, really terrible. Like just like professionally terrible, and but I was obsessed with it, so I just would do it every day, and I'd stay up all night trying to figure stuff out, because I always had an ear, right? I always was like listening to music and then trying to figure out what they'd done to make it sound a certain way and get the drums as punchy as, so it was really fun, and I just kind of did that for years, from the time I was 14 to the time I was, today.
Was that after the Green Day concert, or was that before?
That was after the Green Day concert. I went and saw Green Day when I was like 11 at the Forum, and I went with my friend Ruby, and she was my plug. She'd gotten me into the Green Day concert because she had a ticket, and I just it was like one of those like epiphany moments that you have in your life where you're like, I want to do that. I want to make music. Yeah. And it was funny because I think I played like maybe some piano, but I'd never played guitar, and I just was like, I gotta do it. And I feel like those are the kind of moments that like don't stick. I remember thinking at the time, like, well, I'm 11 and I've had a lot of phases of things I'm interested in that go away. You know what I mean? You're a kid like that young, you're like, I want to be a race car driver, and then it goes away. But it never really went away. I just wanted to be a musician sort of every day after that. It was, just the power of American Idiot, I guess.
And then, what age did you start, like, acting professionally?
I was 12. I begged my mom for, like, a year to let me start going on auditions. Because she was like, at 12, like, let me go on auditions is code for, like, Mom, will you drive me to an audition every day, right? So they're heavily involved.
So you already had, like, a management?
I didn't, actually. My mom had an agent. She was at Buckwald, I think, at the time, and they had a children's department, and I just begged her to introduce me to someone at the children's department. She did eventually, and then I started going on auditions almost every day, and then I got in this movie called Bad Teacher with, I think, Cameron Diaz and Justin Timberlake and Jason Segel, and I was just like a nameless child in the movie, but I was part of the classroom, and the whole movie was about this teacher of a class, so we were there every day and filmed all the time. And, it was really fun. I made some wonderful friends from that movie.
And how long after was it until you did Glee?
It was a couple years. I was 12 when I did Bad Teacher, and then I was 17 when I did Glee.
Oh.
It was 5 years.
Yeah.
Both were really, those were the sort of the biggest things I got to do. I did this independent film that my mom wrote in the middle called Life Inside Out, and I did 2 episodes of that show Modern Family where I played different characters. I played this one character, and that was just like a one-off, right? And then I got an audition like a year later for another character, and I remember getting it and being like, this is stupid, like I was already on the show, like they're not gonna want to have, you know what I mean? Like there's no way they're gonna cast me again as a different person. And the funny thing about the Modern Family office is that the casting room where they audition everybody has pictures of every person that's been on the show. And I was like on the wall, but I had like long hair. I had short hair in the first episode and long hair again, and they just like cast me again. So I was in Modern Family twice, which was really fun. That is the nicest group of people, and like such a fun, that's a fun job. They work not crazy long days, and they improvise a lot. It's really cool.
And throughout this whole time you've been homeschooled?
Yeah, I was homeschooled, kind of at first because I was really weird. I was just like a really weird kid with like separation anxiety and sort of a shitty temper.
Oh, like when you were still in primary school?
When I was a little kid, yeah.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, like all the things I was interested in were extracurricular. This is being homeschooled. All the things I was interested in were extracurricular. And so I just sort of was able to do those and still be homeschooled. And then I did like an independent film when I was 15. And the way that doing movies goes is that they have to hire teachers on set to teach you when you're filming, to sort of equal school.
Oh.
But if you get a diploma, if you finish up high school, they don't have to hire a set teacher. So this independent film didn't have the budget to hire an on-set teacher for me. And so they asked if I'd be willing to take a test to graduate early. And I said, sure.
Yeah.
So I've sort of technically been graduated since I was like 15.
So it was mostly your like mom homeschooling you and Billy?
You know, it's funny, like there's a lot of different ways to be homeschooled. There's sort of strict, structured ways. There's super loosey-goosey ways. And I think we sort of fell in the middle where they were sort of simultaneously like, being an actor means you're sort of halfway stay at home because you work, like acting pays well for the day rate, but you work less days of the year than you do if you're not an actor.
Yeah.
So they were home a lot. And my dad was a construction worker to pay like our bills, our utility bills. And mom taught other classes. But the way we were homeschooled was sort of more like they always described it as like life-based. So if they wanted to teach us fractions, right, we'd bake a pie. And we'd learn like cooking, and we'd learn, like it was cool. Just sort of like, I think to me, and I sort of hold to this day that like the way to learn stuff and retain it the best in your life is contextualize it, right? Like I remember taking, like they enrolled me in like a geography class when I was probably 15, maybe 14, 15. And it was a really fun class. It was a really great teacher, and I remember sort of like learning all of this stuff about geography. And it's still in the back of my mind, but it didn't really stick with me until I started traveling and actually like understanding geography sort of from a real life. You drive from here to here, and you fly from here to here. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you're thinking about it at 13 and you've never left the country, you're just like, so?
Yeah.
It's just harder to contextualize. So I think a lot of, it was always context-based learning. And then, truth be told, like, I've always been a really big fan of figuring stuff out myself. So that was a boon in homeschooling, was just sort of being a person that was always interested in things and trying to figure them out and teaching myself. That was always really fun.
And then all the money that you made from acting, you put it towards music.
Just sunk it right back into studio time, yeah. Which was fun. I deemed that like college. I knew I didn't want to go to college, and I just was like, well, this is like college savings, and I'll spend time in studios working with people that I look up to, and recording with my, at the time, high school band. And
with the Slightlies?
Yeah, it was the Slightlies. And that was really fun. I mean, I've always sort of been a studio rat. I've always wanted to like be in the studio all the time, and I always before I started producing, I hated that as a band, you go into the studio and it's so exciting. Like there's so much gear, and it's like all these, and it sounds great in there, and there's big old speakers, and I always hated that as a band you have to like leave. You know what I mean? You do your week and you record your songs, and then they're like, cool, like that was fun. And then the producer stays and he lives there. You know, he doesn't live there, but he works there every day. And I always wanted that. I was like, I want to be in the studio all the time.
Yeah.
So that sort of was another inspiration behind teaching myself how to produce.
Wasn't it also like your friend's dad was like a mastering engineer? Yeah,
my friend's dad was a mastering engineer, and a sweet guy, and yeah, he was like, I think it's funny when like, as a little kid, you're never more intimidated by someone than your friend's dad.
Yeah.
You know? And so I was always a little bit bashful about asking him questions, but he was very sweet and very nurturing in his advice. And the best piece of advice he ever gave me was that as long as you think it sounds good, that's the way it should be. And I loved that. Because it's really true. There's so much gear, so much money that you can pour into recording music and mixing music and mastering music, but really the only goal is that it sounds really good. You know what I mean? And if you make something sound good for no money, that's the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's like a thing that you need to, there's a compressor value that you need to throw on something to make it sound like a recording you love. And if that's what sounds the best to you, that might be the way to achieve that. But I just loved that mentality of like, and he was saying that like, he said, you're young. At the time I was 15, I think. And he said, you're young, and professionals are going to try to tell you that you're doing everything wrong. But as long as you like the way it sounds, they can't touch you, because that's, you know what I mean? Like they were like, his point was, you just go, yeah, but I like how this sounds. I don't want to change it.
Yeah.
And so that was like great, because I think you can always learn, you can always improve, but it's really important to just sort of trust your instincts and let things be the way they are.
What was the turning point that you don't do much acting and then start doing more and more music?
Just when music became sort of all-consuming time-wise. As an actor, I never got to a point where I was like offered roles. I was always auditioning, and that's totally fine, but that's a big part of your, if you're doing that actively, it's your whole week. Every day is an audition or two, and learning your lines at night and making sure you get to the audition the next day and stuff. So yeah, as soon as music became sessions every day and touring and writing and recording, I just realized I didn't really have time for both. And I also I love the music industry. Like I love meeting people at labels and talking to A&Rs and just sort of geeking out about it, because I'm such a music nerd.
Yeah.
And the acting industry to me is like just less where I feel at home. I like being on set, like performing, but I think the sort of minutia of acting is not a world I feel super comfortable in.
And did you always write songs with Billie, like since you were young?
We started writing songs together probably like at the start of 2015. We were working on some ideas together, The two things that we put out before Ocean Eyes came out were a song called She's Broken that I had written for Billie. I thought like, I want to write a song that I'm inspired by, Billie, and she can sing it. And she was into it, which is cool. And then the second song was this song called Fingers Crossed that she wrote alone.
Oh, wow.
So that wasn't even really co-writing because each of us had written a song separately. And then Ocean Eyes was just me too. And then we just started co-writing all the time.
Yeah.
Almost everything we put out now is a co-write.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How's your relationship with her changed over time?
I think it's gotten better as we've both gotten older. Yeah, I mean, she's like my best friend, so I feel really lucky to get to travel with her and work with her and experience all the things we experienced together. But yeah, I think we just have had it's been a learning experience. We're both really opinionated, and I think that's really important in art, to be opinionated and be passionate about your ideas. And I think one of the things we always talk about is when we're making something we both have super different opinions, it's really important to me that one of us wins. Instead of, I think there's a lot of happy mediums and compromise in the world. And to me, that's a recipe for nobody really feeling super passionately about the end result. You feel like, well, this is sort of a watered down version of what I wanted to make. And the other person feels the same way. The other person's like, this is kind of watered down. And I think if two people have two really different ideas and they're both like, I love this idea, someone's going to be more passionate about that idea. You know what I mean? Someone's going to go, all right, you win. Let's go with yours. And then it's this strong, vibrant color as opposed to sort of a clear, thing. And so I think that's been an important lesson to learn, is just letting each other kind of letting our passion for something dictate who wins that argument. You know what I mean?
Is it ever challenging mixing family and business?
Super. Yeah, I think it's less challenging as it progresses because it's just more of what you're used to, becomes the norm. But yeah, I mean, it's on one hand, our whole family just got back from this Billie tour. Our dad helps with lighting direction.
Oh, wow.
Mom is sort of day-to-day management. And then for Billie, sort of a dual, sort of a Billie's assistant and also Billie's day-to-day manager. And then I'm there in her band. So we're all on a bus together for 5 weeks straight. And before that, Billie and Mom and I had been on a separate leg of that tour for 5 weeks. So it's a 10-week tour.
Yeah.
And on one hand, that's a lot of time to spend every minute of with your family. You know what I mean? At 16 and at 20 and also as a parent with kids, But on the other hand, I know for a fact that if Billie or I were doing what we're doing alone or with just each other, we'd miss our parents all the time. You know what I mean? And if I was touring as a solo artist, which I hope to do, I'm sure it'll be a big adjustment, sort of not being with the comfort of your whole family.
With her being your younger sister, are you ever afraid of the sketchiness of the music industry?
The sketchiness and the seediness of the music industry hasn't really touched our lives directly. We've been really lucky, and she has a great team, and we have wonderful management and a wonderful label. I'm terrified every day of people bombing concerts, and people bringing guns to concerts. That scares me every day. Yeah. I mean, that Christina Grimmie artist who was shot by calling him a fan sounds weird, but he was a fan. He was shot by a fan in Florida in 2016. Her brother was next to her when that happened, standing next to her. And so that to me is it's impossible not to put myself in those shoes. So yeah, it's constantly terrifying. But we make sure there's security with Billie whenever she's going to and from venues. We make sure that there's metal detectors at the doors. And, I don't know. I don't want. It's impossible not to be afraid of stuff like that. I also don't want that fear to dictate the way that we live our whole lives and prevent us from doing what we love, which is playing concerts.
How long has your parents been on the team? Do they still do acting
day
now?
one. Yeah, day one. They do. Yeah, Dad does a lot of voiceover work. He reads audiobooks, books on tape. He's the narrator when you listen to a book on tape. And then Mom does a lot of looping and additional dialogue recording for movies. But it's pretty. Billie and I get to have a pretty exciting thing happen every day.
Yeah.
And we just love being around our parents, and Billie is so young that our mom is a complete necessity because she's 16, she's a minor, she needs a guardian. So she's pretty much involved in everything, and Dad is involved in, pretty much everything too, in whatever capacity we can put him in, just to keep the family together. But the creative side is all me and Billie. That's like, our parents don't really have anything to do with the recordings or the writing at all.
How do you balance now wanting to be a solo act, but then also like need to help Billie out with everything?
I think it's actually like, it's funny because it's totally a balancing act, and it's always hard to find enough time to do everything. But at the same time, it's so liberating having so much going on that it just makes you less. I think there's like, my experience has been that like when you have one project and you put every fiber of yourself into that project, it's just super stressful. You have this thing that you're like, this is the one thing that defines me, and that I have to, use as my sole creative outlet and pour myself into 100% of the time. And I think, to me, it's actually really liberating going like, compartmentalizing and going like, today I get to be a producer for an incredible singer, who's also my sister, and write a song with her that expresses who she is and expresses how she's feeling. And then tomorrow, I'm going through this thing and I'm going to write about it for myself and produce. It's just like nice to sort of get to, that to me is like where music has become similar to acting, is like wearing a lot of different faces and hats.
Do you think you'll still like go on tours with her and everything and like produce everything?
I want to tour. I want to tour with her as long as as long as she wants me to be on tour with her. I think pretty much definitely until she's 18.
Oh yeah.
And then I think she should, however she feels at 18, if she's like, fuck off, I don't want to have my brother and my parents with me at 18. I totally respect that, but I think until then I would feel like I was sort of abandoning her if I was like, yeah, have fun on your world tour at 17 without me. That just seems like, if I were her, I'd be pissed off by that. So I want to make sure I'm there. And I also like, touring is amazing, and I love every minute of it, so I'm happy to be on tour with her.
You never really considered being a duo, right?
Duos don't actually do as well, and they're less easy to market, and so I thought it would be smarter label it just a solo project for Billie. And I also thought that if it was a solo project for Billie, having my own solo project would make much more sense.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of like wonderful coverage of her with like Women of the Year and strong women in entertainment. Like Vogue did this wonderful piece about like Maggie Rogers and Billie and a couple other really wonderful artists. And to me, having a duo sort of takes away from the benefit of being a strong female solo artist in 2018. So I thought that would cheapen the marketing of it. And also, it's really like, to be totally, on a totally different note, all of the artistic direction of both of our projects is our own. And so, in that sense, it's really not collaborative. I have nothing to do with like the music videos or the cover art. It's all Billie, and the merch is all Billie. And so to me, that like all of that imaging and branding is so her, and so her brain and the way it all works, that to me is like, well, yeah, this is Billie, And sort of similarly for me, it's like it's just all me.
For your song "Don't Break My Heart Again," what are the inspirations behind that?
I think just that happening. I think I was in love with a girl when I was really young. I was like 14. I didn't really see her regularly for like 5 years. And then she came to one of my band's shows and we started talking, and it was like, we should get coffee. And then I was like, oh, totally, I'm in love with you again. And it was a really wonderful, I don't really have any like, it's sort of a song about letting it happen, because it makes sense that a person who you fall in love with and it doesn't work out would then not work out again. But I just loved her and I loved being around her, and so I was okay with sort of having my heart broken again. And that's kind of the song. It's not a bitter song at all. It's just a song about like, go ahead. Like, yeah. And sort of, I mean, that line in the chorus about like being the definition of insanity is like, that sums up kind of the whole song, which is that repeating the same thing is probably going to lead to the same result. It's not going to You're not going to get together with a person that you got together and it crashed and burned, and you're going to get together again and get married, and it'll be perfect. So, yeah, it's just a song about that thing that I lived through, and I wanted to make sure that song was as... It's funny. I never sacrifice a good song because of honesty. If I'm writing a song and there's a line in it that's not quite true, that's okay. I love fiction, right? And I think people in general are sometimes a little too precious about the truth in their music. They're like, no, this, like, I remember like writing a song with somebody and saying something about midnight, and they're like, well, it actually happened at 10:30, and I was like, midnight sounds better.
Yeah,
like,
it's at 10:30.
That's when it sounds. It's like, you know, and so my point is, like, I'm always happy to embellish or to change my inspiration for the sake of what makes a compelling song, compelling narrative. In the case of Break My Heart Again, every part of that song is true. It just happens to all be true. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I was like, well, this song, I'll write this song 100% true, and then if there needs to be things that are altered to make it a more compelling song, sure. And then I finished it, and I was like, I think we're pretty much done. I think that's good enough, you know.
How do you think your music has changed since the early songs you wrote?
I hope it's gotten less derivative. I think when I first started, it was pretty much just me trying to sound like whoever I loved. At first, that was like Green Day and My Chemical Romance and like Mumford and Sons.
Yeah.
And then it progressed into there's a band called Bad Sons that I loved. I still love, but I really loved at like 16 and just wanted to, I wished I'd been in that band at the time.
Yeah.
And a band called the Wombats and the Killers all became sort of heavy inspirations to me. And I would hope that as I've broadened my taste and my inspiration and sort of come into my own as a producer and a writer, it just feels more like a song that I wrote as opposed to like a song that I wrote that could be a Green Day song.
How would you say you've grown as a person since you were younger?
I'm taller. I think I might be more able to have a good time doing the thing that I'm doing. I spent a lot of time growing up, and I still spend too much time doing it, like looking forward to something or looking toward the end of something, as opposed to just kind of going like, I'm here today, this is great, I'm having a wonderful time, you know. And I feel myself enjoying my life sort of actively more than I used to. So that's nice.
Yeah. What would you say have been your biggest challenges so far?
I don't know. I mean, I've been pretty lucky. Like, I think the sort of, endless challenge that you're never too lucky for is like sort of a self-betterment and just being a kind person. It's hard for me to separate like how much I care about a project and how important it is to me and how disciplined I am in my work from sort of being like a person you'd want to be around. That's really important to me too.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I can just be so consumed by something that, I can't imagine it's super tight for like a girlfriend to spend a day with me. I'm probably fairly morose and like concentrated on a lyric or a rhyme or something,
What does love mean to you?
I think compassion. I think they're pretty much synonymous with each other. And I think to me the times I felt the most in love with anyone are the times I feel the luckiest to be able to spend time with them and know them. And that's just sort of always been the way that I can articulate and understand love, is just like some things, like just feeling really privileged to be a part of something.
What does success look like to you?
To me, success, I always define success as like not having to have a job that I hated to support doing the thing that I was interested in. And as long as I had a job that was directly correlated to the thing that I was interested in, even if it was sweeping the floor at a music studio that I loved or coiling up cables for a band that I loved, that to me embodied success. So the fact that I get to make a living from my favorite thing.
Yeah.
It's like just a, beyond the coolest.
Last question.
What's up?
What do you want to be remembered for?
Oh man, people don't need to remember me. That's okay. I don't really. I've never been like a big like photo taker. I think like to me it's always been the most important to live through stuff like that. I think as far as a musician, if you make something that people resonate with, that's about as good as it gets for me. When I think about the songs that mean the most to me in my life, they're just the songs that I go like, yep, that, me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so to me, I think is if somebody remembers me for anything, which would be sweet, being remembered as like a person that verbalized something that people feel is really nice.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This is really fun.